We want to bring into studio Chris Hall, Managing Principal at Navigator, before that host of The House on CBC Radio, and my former colleague at another network.
It's like old times.
Old times. Chris, thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
Listen, let's begin with a broad stroke of this. Just how significant is this loss for the Liberals?
Well, coming on the heels of losing Toronto St. Paul's, this was another safe riding that they have held literally for generations, Michael. You know, the mortgage was already long paid off. They'd owned it for so long. So I think it's significant in that respect that they couldn't mobilize people to come out, even for a by-election, knowing as they did that this was going to be a battle from having gone through this experience in Toronto St. Paul's. So the big takeaway for the Liberals is not that it's a gut check or anything like that. It's really about, are we resonating with people? Are we actually satisfying them? We have a plan to deal with the affordability questions. Do we have a plan to make their lives better? And particularly, are we looking ahead enough so that their own children feel that they have a chance at the kind of lifestyle that their parents have? And right now, judging by what we're hearing from people, is that the answer is no. They just don't feel good about the government, its direction, and in particular about Prime Minister Trudeau. Yeah,
you know, it's interesting when I think about that, and I think about the by-election in Toronto St. Paul's. You know, from what we heard, there were just people who voted Liberal in the past just couldn't be motivated, not even just to cast a ballot for somebody else. Obviously, the Conservatives won that riding, but people just stayed home in that by-election. In this one, though, you know, let's take a look at the results here, because at the end of the day, even though the Bloc Québécois took this riding, when you actually look at the percentages there, the raw numbers, the Bloc in first place, the Liberals in second place, the NDP in third, but fairly tight margin between the three. So I appreciate that LaSalle-Émard-Verdun is being seen as a bad loss for the Liberals, but does the fact that the first to third place all came close of each other, is that any type of silver lining? Does that temper the type of loss this is for the Trudeau Liberals?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think what it really does say is that the Bloc Québécois has made an inroad in West Montreal, which they haven't done in the past. Every riding around LaSalle-Émard-Verdun is held by Liberals, prominent Liberals. You know, Antigone, Mark Miller right next door, Rachel Bendayan. These are not ridings that generally should be competitive. So the Bloc's message about we will represent you better in Ottawa is a really difficult one if you're a Liberal to counter right now when you see the splits that happened. I think Liberals did stay home. I think that's pretty fair. And the NDP had a really good and strong candidate. Jagmeet Singh was in that riding, what, 8 times trying to support Craig Sauvé. They did okay. I think they felt they should have won. And for the Bloc, this is really a bonus. They have actually made an inroad onto Montreal, the island of Montreal, and it does, I think, signal that there's a different kind of battle shaping up in the next general election for the Liberals, the Bloc, Conservatives, anybody else who wants to compete in Quebec for that sort of sovereigntist vote. Are we going to do enough to satisfy demands for better OAS, old age security for all seniors, expanded powers for supply management? I always forget that term. You know, just to make sure that that's protected. So there's a lot of challenges ahead.
Yeah, a lot of challenges, as you say, especially when you look at how the Liberals have built up their governments in past Atlantic Canada, Fortress Montreal, Fortress Toronto. And you know, when we were listening to senior Liberals today from Cabinet, even the Prime Minister, the response has been, we will work harder. Although that has been their response now for well over a year, they continue to trail in the polls. With LaSalle-Émard-Verdun and Toronto St. Paul's, they have lost 2 important Liberal strongholds. Can the Prime Minister, can Justin Trudeau continue to lead the Liberal Party and expect to actually win a 4th mandate?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. The excuses that they're giving are getting a bit thin. After all these months and 2 consecutive by-election losses, they really should have won. I wonder if the question is being actually posed the wrong way, Michael. It's not whether he should stay, as why isn't he going? He thinks that he can bring back progressive voters to the Liberal side. The ripping up of the agreement by the NDP gives them an opportunity to bash Jagmeet Singh, and we've heard that in House of Commons 2 days in a row now from Liberals saying that when the going got tough, they cut and ran. But that didn't really resonate, obviously in LaSalle-Émard, and it certainly didn't, if you look at the results in Elmwood-Transcona, they didn't do very well at all. Their percentage of the popular vote dropped dramatically. So my guess is that he will face more questions. My guess is they're going to have to make some serious decisions around how much do we put him out? Who else can better carry the message forward? And there's always now Mark Carney, who's going to develop the economic platform for the next election campaign. How prominent a role will he play in the background, devising using a Liberal strategy that is different than what we have seen so far.
Yeah. Listen, we should also talk about Elmwood, Transcona, and Winnipeg, because obviously the NDP were able to hold that riding. Leela Dance, not a Blakey, obviously, but still did rather well when you look at percentage. But what was interesting is not so much the first place, but the Conservatives in second place, because the Conservatives really have built up their support in that riding. They came much closer than they did in 2021. Are there any lessons or trends out of Elmwood, Transcona that you would put on any future federal election?
In the West, I think it's pretty clear now that the battle will be between the NDP and the Conservatives. Let's look at Elmwood, Transcona, a largely sort of lower middle class riding, lots of unionized workers. Pierre Poilievre has made a real attempt to try and attract those voters, and they went from a 22-point spread in 2021 to 4. So obviously the Liberal vote collapsed. They weren't going to the NDP. They were going to the Conservatives. So I think that's a lesson to watch for. If the Liberal vote is soft, where does it go in places like the West, those ridings that the NDP holds now, or Liberal ridings in places like British Columbia? I think the other thing is that we should watch for that battle for the hearts and minds of unionized and blue-collar workers, if I can call them that. They are going to be an important voting bloc. Clearly, some of the messages that Pierre Poilievre has delivered are resonating with them. He's made more speeches to union groups than he has to chambers of commerce. That'll be an interesting one to watch, to see if Jagmeet Singh can blunt that, and whether he does get any boost from having said, we are not going to necessarily support the Liberals, although we may not necessarily not support them either. I think that first vote of non-confidence, or first motion of non-confidence, we'll get a real sense of how strongly the NDP feels about being not tied to the Liberals anymore.
Okay, motion of non-confidence. And of course, by-elections are more interesting the closer we get to a federal general election. Care to venture to guess as to when one might actually happen?
Another by-election?
Oh, not a general election.
General election, okay. I know that answer. I'm still thinking the spring. I think the Liberals do not want to defeat themselves prior to having a budget to use as part of their platform, and Mark Carney's work will be mostly obviously done by then. On the other hand, the Bloc Québécois has real power now. They can be the balance of power if the NDP does decide there's just a hill that's too far to go on, and we'll see. But you've covered minority governments as a host before. Accidents happen. Votes get misplaced. People don't show up. I remember when Paul Martin was in a minority government, watching a female cabinet minister running in to beat the doors being shut for the vote and losing one of her shoes, because that's how important every single vote will be from now until December.
Okay. Watching for people switching to sneakers then.
Not a bad plan.
Chris Hall, always appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Michael.